Ready? Good afternoon, everyone. Woo! We're going to get started here. We've got 75 minutes to hopefully enlighten you with some DeployStudio magic.
So I'm Rusty Myers. I'm a systems administrator at Penn State.
I am Nathan Felton. I'm a sysadmin at the Rochester Institute of Technology. Before we get started, I have one tradition that I kind of started 2 years ago, and thankfully a friend of mine reminded me of it. I now have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and here's a progress update on her growth. Oh, stop pushing buttons. So,
sorry.
Teaching her early on the MacAdmin side of things. Yes,
yeah.
Baby genius. She quite is, actually. To get started, we've got a couple things we want to go through with you on what we think are some things that will help you become a pro at DeployStudio, some kind of advanced workflows of things that are hidden features, if you will, within DeployStudio, as well as some like tips and tricks. So this is our agenda as we go. And then hopefully at the end, we'll have some discussion. I don't know if anyone in here is a member of it, but there is a DeployStudio group on Facebook that Rusty and I posted a question to, and we had some good responses. So we're going to try and answer some of those questions that were asked on the Facebook group, but then open the floor to more questions. It's been pointed out multiple times to please try and use the microphone at the center of the room to ask your questions.
Okay, so first we're going to start with workflow organization. So one of the things that we do is model our workflows off of something like the Dewey Decimal System. And it allows us for easier training and documentation because it gives us a number for workflow items. It also allows us for faster browsing because as things sort by category, we're able to find the things we need quicker. It also works for keyboard selection, which makes things even quicker if you don't like the mouse. And it helps keep our sanity with multiple bins. If you are going to do a new clean setup, we recommend it. When you get default workflows, this is what you see. These are your first 4. And for the most part, I delete the first 3 and then edit the last one to be what I want. And this would be like our typical first run. We just play with it. We get some workflows set up. Things start working. And then we say, oh, this is just getting too out of hand. I need to find something. And it's all sorted by alphabetical, but I forget what I named that workflow. So we are suggesting workflow groups to help maintain your settings. Primary workflows, configuration items, these are just some things we brainstormed. You wouldn't have to use all, you don't have to use any. But in our environments, we find that it's easier to work this way. So here's what it looks like in DeployStudio. And basically what you end up doing is just creating a bunch of empty workflows with these titles. And then underneath these titles, you create new workflows that start with the same number, 1 for 100, and then increment as you go through them, 101, 101, 102, 103. And you can see that we're grouping things by universal, RIT, and base. So we've got different things categorized under primary workflows, and then subcategorized with numbers.
One of the cool features that DeployStudio started with is a concept of a nested workflow. And this allows you to be able to have one primary workflow that you wish to select each time, and then you can have sub-workflows or nested workflows that have things like your configurations, your package installations, your configuration scripts, your profiles. And this allows for a bit more of a dynamic workflow so that you can say, instead of having to create a workflow that puts down an image, binds to AD, and installs Monkey for Mavericks, for Yosemite, for Redacted, you can now just have one workflow that is those tasks of binding to Active Directory, installing Monkey, configuring Monkey, whichever, and you can leave that as kind of a static workflow that you never have to touch again. And then all you do is at your primary workflow level, you simply nest that workflow. So it helps kind of reduce your management time, and it helps reduce the complexity of what you're doing at the primary workflow level. Now, this is the interesting thing is, last year I talked about this, and at the time, you could only do one nested workflow deep. So what that meant was that if you had workflow 101 nesting 201 and 301, you could not have 301 also nest 401. And of course, last year, as I was at this conference, DeployStudio released a new version, which at the time was 1.6.11, that allowed you to, in fact, nest up to 10 workflows deep. So now you can get even more complicated and more dynamic with your nested workflows so that there's less that you have to do later. The goal here is that at the end of the day, you should only ever have to create one primary workflow, and the only thing you should have to do in that workflow is change what image you're laying down. It should just be, and it should only ever happen anytime they release a new OS, because you'll see later that there's ways to make it easier to only ever have to never have to actually change the image you're laying down. So if you use a tool such as auto damage, you can you can just leave that as the same image that you're laying down for an entire OS level or OS version. So Yosemite, Mavericks, etc. Then there's also the option to do static nested workflows. I'm sorry, there's two options for nested workflows. There's static nested workflows, which you can go in and pick just the workflow that you want it to run. But to get even more dynamic and even more automated, you can then also use scripted nested workflows. So instead of picking the exact one you want, you can use logic in a script to actually pick which you need based on hardware identifier, which I believe the next script. Yes, so the example here is you can actually look at something such as the model identifier of your device and pick a corresponding workflow that you would need. A good example that we use this for is, well, we actually do it in Monkey now, but an example that you could use in DeployStudio is detect that if you're a laptop, then you need the VPN client because your laptop's mobile, there's a need for VPN. But if you're on a desktop, there's much less of a need to ever use the VPN because there's a good chance you're going to be on campus. So an example here would be you would ignore going to the workflow that would install the VPN for a laptop, but you would install the VPN for a laptop, but ignore it for a desktop.
So in the previous slide, we had the UUID or title of the workflow when you're doing a scripted workflow. And so the identifier is shown in the admin interface, and it's just long string. You could also use the title too, but if you want to update the titles, it's sometimes easier to hardcode that identifier.
The next topic is access groups. Access groups gives us the ability to control access to the three big utilities within DeployStudio. The first one being the assistant setup. The assistant setup is more or less what allows you to configure your DeployStudio environment, so clearly you'd want to lock this down to only specific users that either have the knowledge or should have the access. So in our case, we lock this down to a group called DeployStudio admins, so only the core admins can make modifications to the install. DSAdmin is something that only allows access to the admin interface where you actually create the workflows. This is one of my gripes, actually, is that it's an all or nothing group. So if you have access to the admin interface, you get all or nothing. I'd like to see DeployStudio do something along the lines of, you have access to the admin interface, but only these users can modify workflows. Only these users can add workflows, or restrict what workflows they have access to see in the admin interface. Which brings us to the third one, which is the DS runtime. This is something that has the kind of level that I want, which restricts groups to the distinct workflows that you want them to have access to. So what that means is when an end user logs into the DeployStudio runtime, you can control what workflows they see. When an admin logs in, they get to see more because you allow for more access to different workflows. One of the things that I recommend with this is something as easy as group nesting. So I kind of have a hierarchy sort of laid out here where end users should be in general, general should be in advanced, and then advanced should be in admins, and that basically makes admins have all of these. I think I said that the right way. And essentially what that'll allow you to do is control different levels, those 4 different levels to the different workflows. And I'll touch more on that in a minute. This is the DeployStudio Assistant where you would set that up. So in here, this allows you to set up multiple groups so that later when you're in the admin, you can pick from those groups to restrict access to different workflows.
Now, just in case if you're wondering, you can run that DeployStudio Assistant multiple times without taking down your DS server.
So this gives you kind of an example of what the outcome becomes. is in this example here, our universal out-of-box experience can be run by our end users. And what that workflow essentially will let you do is go to the Apple Store, buy a brand new Mac, run out-of-box experience, and it won't do anything except get you to a desired state. So it shouldn't change anything that you don't want it, it won't throw down a new image, it'll only change the image that's already there. So we allow our end users to be able to run that workflow. But then we have our more advanced users, which are typically our student employees that we send out into the field to help re-image machines and whatnot. They have access to the complete re-image workflows. So this is what the runtime would look like to an end user. As you can see, they only see the universal out-of-box experience. And then this is what an admin would see, which has the more advanced things such as software, universal configuration, and some base installs. This comes out to be great for self-service. I've seen a couple of users. Actually, you want to talk? I think this is your.
Sure. Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, DeployStudio's runtime originally was just in the netboot. So I pulled it out of the netboot and I started installing it on staff machines. And I had a small limited group in the math department. And I found that the people that were comfortable using iTunes, for example, were happy to install their own software if it was missing when we gave them a machine. And then after that, DeployStudio started providing a package just for the runtime application, which is now what we call the self-service style of accessing DeployStudio. So with those access groups set up and your workflow set up, you can provide a very advanced interface for people to choose what they need to run on their systems.
Computer groups are another way to help automate. This is very useful in computer labs especially, which is where I use it most of the time. So what it allows you to do is assign your workflows to a group of computers at once rather than having to either manually select a workflow at the computer one by one or selecting each computer one by one within the computer section of the admin. This also allows you to help to organize your workstation. So instead of just having a huge list of 400 machines in DeployStudio, you can separate them out into buildings and just specific computer labs. You can separate them between faculty and staff, so on. It also allows for a default group for new machines. So if you have a whole palette that just showed up of 35 machines, it's very easy to boot them, hold down N, let them boot into your DeployStudio, and have them automatically assign themselves to a default group. And then it also allows you to bulk apply properties consistently. Things like if you want a local hidden admin account on all the machines, you can go through and say the same username, short name, and password and apply it to those 35 machines as opposed to having to do it one by one. One of the things that you have to know about the default group function is you need to not check reject unknown computers. Otherwise, it will not allow you to add new computers to the database and therefore not be added to a default group. So this is one of the interfaces for the automation. There's a group here that I call Reboot. I make this my default group. So when I first get a palette of computers, all I really want to do to start is just get them into DeployStudio. I don't really need anything else beyond that. So this will actually switch between reboot and shutdown depending on my need, but what'll happen is I unbox it, power it on, give it some network, hold N, it'll boot into the runtime. I have a special netboot that automatically logs it in, and it'll get this workflow and just reboot or shut down, and it's in my DeployStudio database. Once it's in my database, I can then do something like assign a hidden admin account or change the automation workflow that I wanted to use to re-image or lay down out-of-box experience. So here's an idea of, or an example of what I do for a computer lab. At the beginning of every semester, we just do a nuke and pave, and all we do is we go into DeployStudio for the group for that computer lab, change the automation to our re-image workflow. The key here is resetting the default workflow, because otherwise if a student happens to netboot in the middle of class and it's still using the automatic login netboot set, middle of class they get a brand new nuke and pave image. So what we try and do is reset this so that after it's successfully imaged the first time, it has no automation workflow associated to it anymore. So the next time it boots into DeployStudio, it just presents you with the list of workflows that are available.
So package groups are another concept we'd like to talk about. And package groups allow you to put multiple packages into a single, easy-to-reference group. It helps when you have lots of different packages in your workflow, and those packages have updates to the packages. So this example, Microsoft Office 2011, is a group with the Microsoft Office install and then an update to it. I think this has grown to 4 packages now.
4 or 5.
4 or 5. So it's an advantageous way to maintain the install of a piece of software while keeping it up to date at the same time. And what you do then is just reference that group name instead of referencing a single package. And for adding the name here, the auto-completion will work for you.
Environment variables are something that, again, helps with automation. When you don't have to hard code a path each time, when things start becoming more and more dynamic, the environmental variables that the runtime provides allow for easier automation. Some common ones that I use are things like the model identifier. Again, if you want to be able to differentiate between a MacBook Pro and a Mac Pro, laptop versus desktop type deal. The current workflow ID comes in handy, again, when you're trying to do scripting of nested workflows. You want to kind of know where you are and where you want to go type deal. And the serial number we use sometimes to, I'll show you actually in a second here. We use that to kind of look up additional details about a machine in the DeployStudio database. So that's actually one of the current pitfalls I feel of the DeployStudio runtime variables is not everything that's in the DeployStudio database is available as a default default environment variable. So what you can do is something like this, where the DeployStudio database is nothing more than a whole bunch ofplists that just happen to be luckily named the serial number of the machine. So I actually just recently helped someone on the forums where they were looking to query the ARD fields. There's the 4 ARD fields that you can set on computer objects in the database. And they wanted to be able to query that while in the runtime. So all you need to do is default read and use the variable to get to the repository path while in the runtime. You go into the databases folder, the by host folder, and then the serial number of the computer should be the plist for the computer that is currently in the runtime. So this command here will just dump every variable that's available for the database for that computer. Or you can add on the specific thing you're looking for at the end of it and get just that one value. So,
any questions before we get into discussions and
burn through that kind of
workflow organization and default groups? Sound good? Yeah, question.
When you run the runtime,
so you're talking about when you run the runtime, it reboots and runs whatever workflow you want. Well, you're talking about when he initially...
Like the self-service thing you're talking about.
Oh, so the self-service thing. Okay, so if the self-service application runs on top of the booted OS 10. Right. So it's just like another application. If, as part of that workflow, it requests a reboot, it will reboot that system.
Is that your question?
What are you thinking about?
When you run that workflow, does it reboot any workflow? It doesn't necessarily reboot.
Well, workflows can reboot, but they don't have to reboot. It depends on what the settings are in the workflow. Yeah, and again, you would only necessarily reboot if you're installing something that requires reboot or doing something that needs it. In most cases, I say don't reboot unless you absolutely have to.
How are you tying into, or how are you populating your list of users, as in for the different groups? Are you tying into LDAP or?
Yeah, so in my particular case, on my current production environment, and this is in the process of being changed actually, we actually use open directory groups that nest active directory groups, Why I did that, I don't know. I did it 4 or 5 years ago, but it's still working. So yeah, what I actually have is the same exact group name. So DeployStudio_admins actually exists in Active Directory, and I just add AD accounts into that for the 4 different levels. And when you get to the runtime, it's doing AD authentication with your AD credentials. So that's how we're doing it. I'm sorry, what? No, I'm not. Nothing with DEP.
Now, once DEP allows us to install a package, then maybe. I could foresee it. What's that? It would save a step. If DEP could install a package that would netboot the system into your DeployStudio interface or bind into Jamf or whatever your management solution is, yeah. Assuming that the user goes through the setup assistant on OS X, which is a limitation of DEP. Yes?
Sorry, I'm all the way over here.
It's fine.
Is there going to be any discussion of getting your netboot DeployStudio runtime going?
Is there going to be a discussion about getting your netboot DeployStudio runtime going?
I guess my question is, can you be a little more specific what you're looking for?
Okay. I'm just getting into netboot stuff. Are there any high-level pointers? I don't
Yes, there are a few. We do have a few high-level pointer. We have a few Apple netboot article from Bombeck we reference as part of, I think, the wireless netbooting discussion. What are your pointers for netbooting?
I tell you what, let's go through the rest of the discussion slides we got from Facebook, and then we'll open to more broad questions.
Very good.
So I'll let you start with out-of-box experience.
Okay, so we had a question about out-of-box experience, and there's a question there. I'm not going to read it, but what we're going to talk about is known to desired states, or unknown to known to desired states. And when you get a machine out of the box from Apple, chances are it's in a known state. You know what operating system came on it, you know what build came on it. And at that point, you can do an automated deployment of that system and layer on software and settings, configuration items on top. So there are some desired states. There's like software settings and external auth with AD and OD, where it leaves a login window ready for the user to log in and all the applications ready. There's a local account set up where they just have a local standard or an admin account, but all the software and settings are there too. And there's like a third kind of desired state we think is the setup assistant, where you hand a system to someone. It already has software and configuration items on it, but they also run through the setup assistant, so they get the Apple out of the box experience. So we want to kind of talk about how we would do this before. Manually before, we would create a new user by logging in through the setup assistant, creating our admin account, then going to system preferences, or maybe going into directory utility and binding. Automated way of doing this through DeployStudio is either the new user form or the configure user task within the computer's database. So you can apply to a group of computers or to individual computers, and as an admin user or a standard user, and it will create that user every time that system is told to be configured using the configure task.
One thing to note about that is you don't necessarily have to image a machine to use the configure task for any reason. So you can go in and apply the create user task to any already made machine, and it'll just add the user to already existing users, or it'll add a user if there's no users already there. It's dynamic like that.
So after I'm done setting up user accounts, the next thing I do is I need to install software. So I have to download my packages from a file share or plug in a USB drive. Well, that's the manual way of doing it. And the automated way of doing it, as we've seen, are package groups and workflows to install packages. And then again with the changing preferences, automating this with a script task or configuration profile task.
One of the things that this slide reminds me of is there's a lot of things that DeployStudio can do that other things can do. I myself am guilty of migrating a lot of stuff out of the automation of DeployStudio and instead putting it in the automation of Monkey. So more or less, I'm at the point where I'm using DeployStudio to lay down my image, and then Monkey takes care of the rest. But for some people who might not be as comfortable using something like Monkey and are much more comfortable with something a little more simpler like DeployStudio, you can use DeployStudio for all of it. You can do profiles, you can do scripts, you can do packages, you can do imaging, which Monkey can't do. unless you count create OS 10 image or package. So yeah, that's the one thing I try and get across each time with DeployStudio is you really can manage your entire fleet of Macs with just one tool. You don't need stuff like Monkey if that's the type of thing that scares you.
Is the person who asked the OBE question on Facebook here? Did we answer it?
We had a question actually about upgrading OS 10. So currently, say you're on Mavericks and you want to be able to upgrade to Yosemite, you could use something from, again, Greg Nagel with the create OS 10 install package. And you can set that up as nothing more than a package install workflow task within DeployStudio. So you boot to your NetBoot set, you run that workflow, it throws down the image or the install package for OS 10 Yosemite, and the next time it boots, it starts installing the upgrade. You can do this as an in-place upgrade. There's no need to re-image or back up any data, though you may still want to in case something goes awry. So there is stuff available. Rusty actually has backup restore, which is something you kind of developed.
Yeah, we'll take it a little bit more in depth in it later, but it'll allow you to back up a user home folder to your file share for DeployStudio, which I believe accomplishes this question. So person, yeah? So what about going for more than one OS 10 upgrade? So OS 10 plus 2 plus 6.
10.6 the current?
10.6 to 10.10? It's been a while since I've been on 10.6. Does anyone know if you have to go from 10.6 to 10.8 before you go to 10.10?
No.
Nope, the answer is no. 10.6, install the create user,
no success?
Create OS 10, install package right on top. 10.6.8. So
using this method? Oh.
What method did you try? With a would you download the installer? Oh, you used net install? Okay. So net install failed to upgrade a 10.6.8 system. It did netboot and it started trying to install and then it failed. That's a tough one. How many systems do you have to go from 10.6.8 to 10.10? I would say try the backup and restore package, nuke and pave, and then restore their data. That might be not a cleaner option, but at least you go from an unknown state. You don't know what's wrong with 10.6.8 that it won't let you go to 10.10. You get to a known state with your base image, and then you go to a desired state, restoring the user data and configuration software. The 10.6.8 supplemental update may help. Yeah. So maybe try the 10.6.8 supplemental combo update.
Well, and the other suggestion I heard, and I've never experienced this, is maybe go to 10.8 first and then jump from 10.8 to 10.10.
That's what I usually do, but I was trying to save some time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I can imagine. Oh. So was that your question?
No. Well, I know, Dennis, did you have more to add? I believe this was your question.
It was my question.
Oh.
We're using a really long procedure right now that involves taking the source machine, making a carbon copy cloner backup of it, just to be super safe. Then
So you're taking the source machine, making a carbon copy cloner backup.
Yeah, the machine through a nuke and pave, and then use the migration system to come back.
Oh, migration system.
I'm very anxious to give this a shot.
Okay, so you carbon copy clone the drive to another backup drive, you nuke and pave, and then you use Migration Assistant to restore to the main system.
Safe, but it's slow.
Yep.
All right. Cool. Oh, we both pushed a button.
Stop. Okay, you go. You're the button pusher.
Okay. Has anyone ever gotten Multicast working? I'm asking the crowd. We got one hand, two hands,
That was like
three and a half, 4.
Is that a full hand?
5. We're up to 5.
6. I got it working once.
Yeah.
It's 5 years ago.
So I've actually gotten it working sort of with the latest OS and the latest version of DeployStudio. And I say sorta. The problem I had is there are definitely bugs in it. The three big ones that I'll point out is there are the options within DeployStudio to say, hey, don't start until you get X number of clients, or hey, don't start for X number of minutes. I found that neither one of those values are currently working. As soon as the machine boots, it just goes. It's just not listening to those two values at all right now. The third issue I found, because those two options don't work right now, is that the first machine that connects and starts the multicast and starts imaging and whatnot, it seems like as soon as that machine is done imaging and does its reboot, any of the machines that were also imaging in the same multicast stream just start failing. So if I happen to get enough of them to all image at the same time, it works. So my test case was 6 machines, just to kind of keep it small. I got 4 of them to all image successfully, and then 2 of them rebooted with some people call it the prohibited sign, I call it the no OS sign. So your results may vary, mileage may vary, as Rich Troutman says. So it does work kind of, sort of. I do know there are extreme benefits to it. I personally have brought down the network to my building a couple of times, trying to image way too many Macs at once. And I get slapped on the wrist for it each time, and I tell them, give me a bigger backbone. So we'll see how that works. But yes, so I don't know, does anyone have any input on making multicast a bit more successful? Okay, I'm going to ask you to use the microphone if you can. Sorry. You're so close.
Okay, with current version, everything updated, I have a setup I can put 108 machines on a bench at a time, and the 2 keys, I was using those both. Yeah. Either get to this number or after this time initiate. Several versions ago worked fine. I have discovered now if you only set one of them, it works.
But not both of them.
Not both of them.
Interesting.
And don't put any value in the other field.
So just blank it. Okay.
Cool.
So don't even put 0, just blank it completely.
Correct.
Okay. Interesting. Thank you for the mic, using the mic. All right. The one thing that I did find that I think quite a few of us that have tried this and Googled for this a couple of times is help from Mike Bombeck. There's a statically archived page on AFP 548, sorry, that gives you tips on how to kind of adjust your stream. There's 2 things. One's your stream and one's your disk I/O, I believe, your network stream and disk I/O. So there's some great tips here. It goes all the way back to like 10.2 or 10.3, but ASR multicast really hasn't changed too much that I know of since then. So a lot of the tips that it gives you to kind of hone in the perfect multicast settings are still out there and still very valid, I find.
So, wireless net booting. Anyone want ask this question here? No? Okay, well, they asked if wireless net booting was viable, pretty much. And no, probably not. It works. I did it when the MacBook Airs came out a few years ago. I had to set up my own AP. I used the DHCP from our existing network, and I just turned off DHCP on the Apple AP, and the laptop booted through it, and it worked. But it was extremely slow. So I then started buying the Ethernet dongles and just doing it that way. It's much quicker. And with the change now, DeployStudio moving from MAC address to serial number, it's no longer really a concern what the MAC address is of your Ethernet dongle. Anyone else got wireless net booting working? A couple people?
Is it also painfully slow for you? Oh no, we got to shake the head no. Good point. You probably tried it on what, G?
Yeah, that was, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, maybe it's worth still giving another try sometime on
Not
modern.
to mention the fact that I was creating a new network within Penn State's network, so I was, the wireless was competing. Great. Okay, any other questions? Cool.
Oh, I'm pushing buttons.
So we had another question about DeployStudio working on a Mini, but not working to image a MacBook Air. And without really understanding exactly what's going on, our best guess is the OS build. So each Apple system has an operating system associated with it, and each operating system has a build associated with it. And the build is kind of like that hidden number that says, I support these pieces of hardware. So even if a system supports 10.10, it may not support the latest build. No, not reverse that. It may not support an older build.
Correct.
Excuse me. It will support probably the latest build unless there's a fork in the builds and there is a special build for a laptop versus a desktop for the same point release of the OS.
Right. Just this comes down to a lot of people were very happy to see 10.10.4, not only because Discovery D is finally gone, woohoo, but also because it became a unified build, what some people call a unified build, because the models that were released, I think they're mid-2015 MacBook Pros, had computer-specific builds on them. So 10.10.4 got us back to a unified build that can theoretically be used on everything from 10.10.4 back until whatever hardware 10.10 Yosemite actually supports.
Yeah, so we included a few of the Apple's articles on finding the hardware build, finding the version and builds by Mac and by OS, and our Apple's polite article on not installing an older build on a newer machine. So network bandwidth, here's just another math problem. If it takes 8 to 10 computers, it takes 5 to 6 hours. Unicast, right? So you are pushing out the same bits at different times. You've got disk I/O issues maybe, network latency issues. It takes more time to do a unicast to multiple machines. So it's like doubling of your time each time you start pushing out. So this is why you could take 200 minutes for 10 computers. Not bad for an overnight rebuild, but multicast can kind of come in and save you if you get it working in this instance.
And this is one of those kind of open-ended questions where you need to know more about the environment. I mean, it could be something as small as you're only on a 10-100 switch versus gigabit. You could be on gigabit, to the client, but you may only have a, heaven forbid, a 10-100 uplink to that switch. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could be wrong with the hardware of the device. I mean, if you're running the 5400 RPM drives, that's going to majorly increase your imaging time. So the network can be a factor. The client hardware can be a factor. There are definitely a lot of factors involved.
The server hardware can be a factor too, where you're storing your DeployStudio repo. Question?
When it comes to the multicast, for whoever's overcome it, or I guess has figured out what the problem is, but it's just something they can't deal with at the time, what has been the major problems with multicast?
So what are the major problems with multicast?
The limitation of it.
What are the limitations?
Reducing network traffic. I mean, we know what it's supposed to do, so that why doesn't it?
Well, I don't think it actually reduces network traffic, if I understand it correctly.
Well, it reduces network traffic from your server to your end node. So if you have a lot of hops, it helps with that. But I mean, if your server's on the same node as your clients, it's not going to do, it's the same thing, as far as I know.
Well, multicast also works in that whenever you netboot a system, it picks up that multicast stream at whatever point it is. So if you're 49%, the image that you're restoring is broadcasted bit by bit, over and over in a repeated process. So if you netboot and it's at 49% of that image, it starts laying that down there and then waits until it gets back to number 1 and then finishes up that first 49%. So you could theoretically take down your network if you're pushing out bits constantly all through, and your clients pick up, most of them, but not all of them. So it's a challenge because of the networking, and you're making sure that your networking is solid.
It's usually a network infrastructure problem.
That's
Yes. I will tell you the one thing that I've heard from other places, and I think may actually be a problem at my institute that no one wants to talk about, is multicast maybe being blocked. So the fact that there's definitely network admins that turn off multicasting and block the IPs for it. Yes.
So your multicasting has to be supported on your switch. But what it does is you send out, you have 30 clients, let's say, they all join the multicast group. Your DeployStudio is going to start sending out an image. It's going to send it once to that group. And then every switch that has a client that's a member of that group, the switch itself duplicates that packet to all the switch ports that contain clients that are members of that multicast group. So the link between your DeployStudio server and whatever switch your machines are connected to only sees the equivalent of one unicast client worth of streams. But if your switch doesn't support multicast, your host, if a router is going to block the multicast group, your host, if you have something else upstream that's not going to let you join that multicast group because it works on an IP rating of 224. I forget exactly your host there. So you really have to get a cooperative network admin if you want to get multicast working well.
Okay. So you want to rephrase that?
It's got to be supported by the switch that your machines are connected to.
All right, so to rephrase for the people at home, basically you've got to get the support from your network admins. Your switch has to support multicasting. Your routers need to not be blocking multicasting. Any other tidbits real quick? Or is that pretty much it?
I don't know. That said, that's how it works in theory. I've never actually tried to.
Oh, okay. Do we have another?
I can't think of any reason in, say, my particular environment why that would work. But I'm not in your environment, you're not in my environment.
So, explain the packet through the switch one more time for the folks at home, because that was really interesting.
Okay, all right. So this is Linux admin who used to be the network guy in a former life. So the way multicast generally works is any client that wants to do multicast joins a multicast group. It sends an IGMP packet out into the network and says, I want to join this group, and it has a specific number, just like an IP address. Every piece of network infrastructure that has IGMP, the multicast turned on, records that, hey, there's someone downstream from me on this port who has just joined this multicast group. And that has to go all the way back up between the server that's a member of this group and the DeployStudio server in your case, and then the client that's trying to do the multicasting. And if any one of those network pieces in the middle doesn't know anything about multicast, it's not going to join the group and it's not going to know. So what happens when you start sending out the multicast packets, your server is going to send it out one time, just as if you were booting one unicast client. But then every switch between it and the border of your network, if it has members that have joined that multicast group, it's going to duplicate that packet to any switch port that has a member of that group on it, even if that member is a couple switches away. So every switch in between has to do it. So instead of your server sending the packets once per each client, each individual switch is duplicating it to clients on as you need to go. So if the result can really cut down the network usage on one particular link, if your end switch, typically they're all in the same room, you got a lab full of machines you're net booting. So it's that final switch that feeds your lab that actually duplicates the packets, and the network bandwidth between that lab and your data center only sees one stream. So that's why multicast is so awesome when it works, and that's why multicast is so fragile when it doesn't.
Thank you so much. That's the most technical explanation I've heard in the past 4 years. So.
I love this community. This is fantastic. Thank you.
There was no way I was paraphrasing that.
I know.
If it says bit by bit, close enough, right?
Yeah, you're close enough.
All right, so this is going bit by bit. I know in the past when I first tried multicasting, I used ARD. I said all the machines boot off of this netboot thing, and they all went up, and a couple hours later they were gradually doing their thing, and it was like a heavy load. I now go around and just hold down N. It gets to a certain point, walk over to the next one, hold down N. And so my theory is, and I don't know if this is true, but it feels faster, that if the first machine is grabbing these bits, you know, the beginning of the job, and then the next one starts up, that first one's done with the beginning, and then the next one can start at the beginning. So all the bars are slightly off from each other as opposed to go. And they all go at the same time. It feels faster. It seems faster. Is it? Or is that not
Honestly, I think
true?
I don't think that's too true. My theory real quick is that there's a lot of stuff is just going into cache on your server, and it's going into cache on the network switches. So the bits you're sending are being cached in memory along the way. So it might seem a little bit faster, but maybe he's got a better explanation than I do.
You're confusing multicast and unicast. Multicast is the ASR session for the image. All of your net boots are unicast. You're flooding your network if you turn them all on and try to net boot them with unicast traffic for the net boot, and it's never getting to the ASR stream for the multicast.
So I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood then. So you're telling me if you net boot 10 machines at once, it seems slow. But if you net boot one
The
here.
imaging seems slow. I'm not talking about just the booting of them.
Oh.
I
Okay.
know that's always tedious on it, but just the imaging itself
Seems-
feels
I don't see
faster
that.
if one is starting, and then you start another one just like 1 minute after,
So-
1 minute after.
What's your storage like? Where's your DeployStudio repo stored? SSDs?
No,
Like a RAID?
Yes, on a RAID.
So it's possible that what you're describing is DeployStudio has to take that mastered image from your repository and lay it down on the local hard drive, right? And we have an answer here?
Well, yeah, because it's the same thing, but it's... I've seen the same thing before, and I think it's a little bit deceptive because when you first boot that client and it actually net boots and start the imaging process, there's a time estimate there, and you see it making progress. As you start going further and further down the list, if you go back and look at that client after you've got 5 more of them running, you're going to see that they all slow down and that estimate starts creeping up. It started out, it said it was only take 20 minutes. After you got 10 of them going, you're going to find that first client now is all of a sudden blowing up to an hour and a half or something before it's done. At least that's been my experience.
Okay, so it doesn't really matter. We can just run through, just boot them all, and then just understand it's going to take a while.
It sounds like you don't have multicast turned on.
No, he's not saying he does. Yeah. He's saying unicast, but what he's saying is staggering the deployment of unicast by 5 minutes to reduce network load, which we see that in some products, but I don't think that's, like he explained, is what's happening. But
Probably helps net boots.
netboot maybe, yeah.
Now, what I have seen also is there seems to be a limit, at least on some servers, as to how many clients can actually be hitting the underlying AFP or SMB server to start the stream of the image. And what I've seen, like if you boot a whole lab full of 30 clients, they may or may not all actually net boot up to the runtime, but probably only about the first 10 or 15 of them, depending on your network, will actually start streaming. But in some cases, you don't care. If you just wait long enough, as soon as those first 10 finish up, the others will just keep reconnecting, and eventually they'll go through.
I got one over here.
There's also the storage. Everybody's talking about networking, but if you have a very heavy image on the storage, single drive or RAID, and you're imaging 20 machines, then the 20 machines are not at the same place. So that's the big difference with multicast and the big advantage of multicast. Your magnetic disks just go sequentially and reads once and shoots it out. When you're trying to image 40 machines at once, then you have the heads of your magnetic storage are leaping all over the place, and you get a massive slowdown on your disk I/O that might be slowing you down more than the networking could, and you don't get that when you're doing multicast.
I would check your disk I/O when you're doing those net boots to see what it shows.
Well, whoa, I'm going to fall on someone, and then I'm going to bring up the point of if we're all doing the same image, it shouldn't matter because the OS should cache those blocks off of your storage no matter what it is, assuming you're imaging a lab of 40 machines all with the same image. I would focus more, rather than beefing up the storage of your system, see what you can do to beef up the RAM on your system. Because that way you can fit that whole, if you can fit that whole image in cache, then it doesn't matter if you're reading off a single hard drive because you'll cache the whole block.
There's also something that should be said, and I haven't tested this, so this is just an experimental throw out there, is there's probably going to be some differences between protocols as well. So AFP versus SMB3, especially on the later OSs like Yosemite that's doing SMB3, I'm pretty sure, where the protocol, the actual file transfer protocol, has had newer revisions that allow for faster transfer of larger files. Go ahead.
These for us, one of the things we noticed, besides you should talk, something you mentioned, but talk to your network admin, is that you may want to make sure they're not using like packet shaper or something similar in your network. Because what we noticed was we imaged one lab once, imaged pretty fast. We tried, when we imaged again, it was real slow. We talked to the network admin. He said, "Oh yeah, we saw imaging, we dropped down the priority on the network for it, and it made us slower, so you may want to also check into that."
Thank you. Yeah, Good idea.
All right, we've got about 3 more slides to get through, and then we'll go back to just open discussion.
Yeah.
I think the next one's you.
Okay. Excuse me. So, as we talked a little bit earlier, backup, restore are some shell scripts that I wrote a few years ago that allow you to back up a user's home folder, whether it's a local user or a network user like an AD or OD user. It allows you to save that user's information on the DeployStudio repo and then restore that after you nuke and pave. So it gives you a really easy way to, if you're upgrading grad systems, even though we don't promise to keep their data, this is our best effort to keep their data. So to back up, first what happens is the system net boots, and this script task runs, and it finds the user. And it takes that user's home folder and throws it on the AFP server. It also grabs the user's plist if it's a local user. If it's an Active Directory user, we don't care about local plist because that gets recreated when they log in next time. Okay, so then once we've got it on the server, we're ready to restore. So we take our vanilla image, we add our software and configurations, and then we take our user and put them back on the new system or existing system, depending on what you want to do. And everyone is happy. I've heard that reports of this worked in 10.10.3, so I haven't made any changes to it in a while, but it seems to be going well. Let me know if you have any questions on it. Yes?
Should it be run after reboot?
Should it be run after reboot? No. It's run during the workflow. Yep.
Sorry. What type of time constraints have you been using with this? I mean, if you need to restore 100 gigs of user data, you're dumping it to the same server that you're net booting from.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like we're saving a whole lot of time.
Okay, so the idea behind it was like troubleshooting one system at a time. So it wasn't designed to do a whole lab or a whole group of staff at the same time. But yeah, I agree. Like you're saying, if you're doing a bunch of systems at the same time, it's going to be really slow.
Even with one system, I would think.
Well, with one system, you're not actually restoring while you're doing the backup, so you're not crossing the streams. But it's just a lot of data.
Just moving the 100 gigs
yeah.
up sounds like a pain in the ass.
It's not with a script.
It takes time, yes.
It does take time, but if I have a failing hard drive and I can't get the system to reboot or reliably boot up, I can try and net boot it and do my best to get that data off, even if the drive is failing. So I do.
Just writing it to a Thunderbolt disk?
Yes. Yeah, because what I can do is I can have text do this. I don't have to give Thunderbolt disk or USB or FireWire disk to everyone. This can happen at any point in time, and in fact, if I wanted to, we could probably let faculty do it. You could probably give faculty a workflow to back up and update their image. So that's the only reason. I agree, though, it is slow to move that data. And if you have a failing hard drive, it's even slower.
One thing to note, too, is you had a concern about it being on the same server as your netboot server. You can change which server. Yeah, exactly. Okay.
I was wondering, can I net boot to like a static IP address? So for instance, if I have an entire lab of computers that are all static and they're all named after their host name, node name, you mentioned how you could do like wireless net boot, though it'd be slow. What about like a static address? Can I point it towards like an entire lab, or would it be the kind of thing where I might actually be better off doing it wirelessly if that were the case?
So what you're saying is there's no DHCP.
Sorry?
Try and get DHCP. Yeah. So we actually don't have DHCP in our labs here at Penn State. So we can't use DeployStudio to reimage systems. What we've done is we've taken the last 35 gigabytes of the hard disk and created our own operating system partition there. And we reboot into that. That restores the base image and lays down our configuration items and then reboots the main partition. So it's like what DeployStudio does, only on the same drive. It's hidden, yes. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
I have a recommendation for static addresses because I ran into that into the medical space I was using.
Okay.
And sometime you want to
do... So recommendation for static IPs?
Yeah. And what you want to do is, because sometimes I use a lot of netboot a lot to do troubleshooting. And the problem with a static address is that when you netboot the machine, you don't know the IP address it's going to get. So even if you want to use static address, I recommend using DHCP with reserved addressing. This way the machine gets the same address all the time, just like a static address. But if you net boot it, it will also still get that same address, and you can log into it, you can troubleshoot it, because sometimes when a device, an appliance or a Mac goes bonkers, it might lose its DHCP, or its static address. So this way you get something consistent, but you need a good DHCP server that will handle reserved addresses.
Agreed. Thank you. Okay.
All right, so just some additional topics that have been brought up in times before. A tasks SDK. So right now I believe there's 19 tasks available to add to a workflow within DeployStudio. And Rusty and I just checked the other day. I think it was all the way back to 2012?
Yeah, so 2011 or 13.
13, somewhere in there. At one point, the admin on the forums for DeployStudio made some comment about there being an SDK to generate your own plugins or your own bundles for tasks so that you can make custom-built tasks. And we keep poking them, and I think we just posted again the other day to see if there was any update 3-4 years later, and there isn't. But it's kind of one of those pie in the sky things that we all hope, or at least I hope, comes to be true. One of the things that you could potentially do with this is create a monkey task for your workflow, so that you could add something like your client identifier or your monkey repo URL, or things along those natures. Freeze home DIRs, I've never used this.
I've used this once in testing, and freeze home DIRs is a feature that DeployStudio gives you. So it's a checkbox, you can select it. And what it does is it creates a cache of the home folder, and anytime somebody logs in, it uses that cache. When they log out, it deletes it. Like a guest account. Yep, that's it. So it just freezes that home directory. So every time somebody logs in, they get the same one.
And then import computer CSV, when you download the installer for DeployStudio, on that disk image there's an extras folder, and within that extras folder is a template CSV. There is one caveat here. I've seen a couple of times where they've added features to DeployStudio and forgot to add the additional columns to that CSV. So just kind of pay attention to that, but it's a great way to do a bulk import of computers into your system, especially again if you do a palette of brand new computers. I forget what keys are absolutely necessary because I don't actually use it, but one thing that I've used at RIT is a barcode scanner, because Apple is amazing at putting all those barcodes on the side of the box with serial number and MAC addresses and stuff like that. So I usually just zap that into, we have an internal inventory system that I zap it into, but you could do something very similar with a CSV. So yeah, what questions do you guys have? Is there anything that you would like DeployStudio to do that it doesn't do already?
Come on up to the mics.
Yeah, okay.
On the backup and restore task,
yes.
What happens to the user's folder after it's done restoring that's put into the repo?
It stays in the repo.
And then you have to go to manually delete it?
Yeah, I think, I can't recall if there's an option to remove it when you're done restoring, but if that's something you're interested in, we can do that really easily.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
So I'm a little bit of a novice with this, but I have done it at least once. And what I did is a lot of testing first, and then deployed using a switch to a number of workstations. But what I had a little trouble with is getting the numbering, because I use numbering in the host name to assign to each computer. Sometimes it would reset, sometimes it wouldn't. So is there a trick to make sure that you really can control the auto numbering that goes with it?
That's a good question.
Yeah, so I have the nicety of DHCP and DNS, so all of our computer naming happens through, we have an internal system, I guess, that does it for us, that gives us DNS entries. So my naming of computers comes from DNS, so I don't actually get to play with that feature. But the one, I got a hand up over here.
Well, yeah, to that point, if you created a group for your computers and you're showing the numbering prefix or whatever, and it numbers for the first time, if you ever bring those computers back into that group, it's going to want to renumber them all, and it might seem random how it does it. So if you've got a lab or a room with assigned computer numbers, it's going to get messed up. So once you've numbered them, take that out of the group, and that won't be reapplied as you make other changes to the computer group information. So that's what I've been able to figure out. Is it somehow randomly, applies those numbers. So do it once, get it how you want, and then just take that information out of the group, and it won't mess it up.
Great.
Can you parse like a file of computer names?
That's the CSV, yeah.
Oh, well, so yes, you can do that. You can input records. You could also do it as part of a workflow.
Because we use asset tags in our computer name.
Sure. Yeah, you could do that. Yeah. So there's probably multiple. Oh, excuse me. There's probably multiple ways to do that. To take a list of computers with names in them and match them up by serial number to name, right? So you could import that into the database, computer database, and have those things automatically be named matching what you got. You could also, as part of a workflow, write a script that checks for the MAC serial number within that file, and then uses like awk to print out the second field.
I feel like there's a way to do that. I feel like I've seen that done before. What you're trying to do, but it's just not on the top of my head.
So the computer groups? Oh no, when you import computers, I think that's the simplest way, is importing the computers. If you can get the CSV import to work.
Spreadsheet first.
Yeah, create a spreadsheet first. Does that make sense? Or you need it more dynamically? Because, so here's another idea. Host a text file on a web server that has your serial numbers and your host names, and you update that periodically when you get new machines, and then the workflow curls that file down, finds it, and names it accordingly. You could do the same with like REST APIs and more advanced stuff too. Just off the top of my head.
God, I hate that button.
Any other questions? Thoughts? Yeah, can you use it? Thanks.
Just a question for you guys. Have you had any trouble imaging computers that have core storage, the new iMacs and the new MacBook Pros coming out?
I have not.
No, I mean, I have not. I had I got the wrong database with me here right now, but as far as core storage is concerned, as long as you make it pick Macintosh HD, it doesn't, to DeployStudio, it doesn't care that it's a core storage volume or anything like that. It just finds the volume by name. The only time I think I've ever seen issues is sometimes the first available option when putting down an image. Restore. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes when you do target volume of first disk available, actually the irony of this is this machine is running a Fusion drive right now, and I forgot to do the Fusion workflow. So my OS got laid down on the solid state side of the Fusion drive, and the other one's just kind of hanging out right now. So yeah, that's a thing. But anyways, as long as you usually enter the value of Macintosh HD, as long as it's already partitioned, that usually helps with any issues you may run into with volume of core storage and stuff like that. That's actually typically what I do for any of the tasks that I do for out-of-box experience. Usually I know when it's coming out of the box that it's called Macintosh HD, so I just make all my tasks point straight to that explicit value. So that helps a lot. But I do know that first disk available in my experience has been kind of here or there, not always working. So. Yes. Prime example is a Fusion drive.
So I just had to do some Fusion stuff the other day, and what I found was if I create a Fusion drive first, I'm trying to use the projector remote. So first SSD available, first hard drive available, create an entire partition. Doesn't matter what its name is, because then I can come in and use the partition task. Secondary, some secondary, and I can use the previous task target if I get in the right place, and I can create whatever name of the drive I want. Right?
You gotta click the little in the corner, hover over it.
There it is. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. So then you can name the drive here. I suppose you could do that here too.
Yeah, for the Fusion task, you can do it here.
So you can do that here too.
Yeah.
Save a step. I was doing double duty. So yeah, then you would have so what we're talking about here is back to the desired state, right? You have a desired state, and you either have an unknown state or a known state. You know it's called Macintosh hard drive, or you have no clue what it's called, and you need to nuke it. and set it up so you know what it's going to be.
So the other thing I just noticed, because I don't really look at my workflows that often, but apparently there's now a thing for convert to core storage. So try playing with that, see what happens. Any other questions, comments?
Anything anybody wants to see?
Yeah, I just kind of threw DeployStudio on here for...
Okay, this is really more of a pet peeve than anything else. It seems like all too regularly something glitches out and all my computer groups go away. Now, the computers themselves still know they're part of a group, but DeployStudio doesn't seem to think that it has groups anymore. And I can put them back in, but it gets very tedious if something blows up twice in one day and you have to put the groups back. Has anyone else had this problem or seen any way to keep DeployStudio on track with that?
Any idea?
So I've never had my groups disappear, but the one thing that I was going to show off here that I think Rusty's kind of getting to. So are you having problems with the groups disappear or the computers in the groups disappear?
The groups disappear.
Right. So
every upgrade I have done, I think they've gone away.
So the first thing I would check with that are the permissions on this file right here, this group.settings.plist. That's where those groups and how they're defined is defined, is in that plist.
Where is that located?
It's in the wherever your database is located. So
Got it.
For us, it's DeployStudio databases by host group.settings. Now there is a caveat to this, is this file is very finicky while DeployStudio is running. So anytime you try and do a backup or a restore of this file, you've got to stop your DeployStudio service first. So that would be maybe another thing to think about when you're doing your upgrades, is the installer is supposed to stop the service during the upgrade, but maybe an extra step for you would be to stop it ahead of time. But also just verify your permissions on that directory, because if it's having problems touching or reading that file for whatever reason.
Yeah. The other thing I might say is if that happens, you can quickly add machines back to groups. I believe it would work if you just do a defaults right and say the DS computer group and the name of the group, and you can quickly add your systems back in by iterating all of those systems.
Right. This goes back to the, I believe, I don't know if cprefs D is getting in the way here or not, but I know that anytime you try to manually edit anything in the database while the service is running, sometimes it doesn't catch it. Right, so sometimes it's easy. A lot of the scripts that I use to actually manually modify any of these, it actually goes in and kills the DeployStudio service first, modifies it, and then starts it up again. So that would be my only recommendation. If you're going to touch any of the plists in the directory, do that first. The other annoying thing that I found too is anytime, like for example, masters, I'm sure everyone's seen this before. If you try and add a master manually to the master's folder, for example, from an auto damage build or whatever, you have to click on another thing in the UI and then it like updates that it's there. So it's not as real time as you would think, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, computer name. Yeah, anything, yeah, sometimes anything you set somewhere else, you have to click elsewhere to get it to update. Yep.
So I don't use DeployStudio at all, but I'm just curious, when you take that one image out of the box and it's just one machine, how long does it take before you're ready to rock?
For the out-of-box experience?
Sure. So we're talking software and configurations and everything?
Yeah.
It depends on what your configuration software is. For us, what we try and do is just a very basic, or at least what we used to do before Monkey came along, was very basic, is we'd give them Reader, we'd give them Office, we'd give them AD binding and things like that. So I think all in all, we had like 15 tasks, and I want to say it took us like 10 minutes. And honestly, the bulk of that was Microsoft Office and getting it to download to the disk fast enough. So I'm saying like 15 minutes on a new machine with a solid state and stuff like that, like recently. So it all depends on, again, hardware and how many packages and tasks you have. But the cool thing about the tasks for us is they were mostly just scripts. So I mean, it just dumps them down real quick and runs them really, really fast. So the bulk of it would be, Reader and Office installs.
Yeah. Pro in under 4 minutes.
So I'm also, one thing we didn't really touch on here is I'm a huge fan of thin and or modular imaging versus monolithic golden image stuff. So for me to lay down a computer lab right now, especially now that most of our stuff is in Monkey, I quite literally use, again, DeployStudio to nuke and pave. I can lay down a 6 gig OS 10 image in like a minute and a half. So the problem there is, if we go back real quick to the networking discussion, I have more problems with my Monkey repository bringing my network to its knees than I do the multiple unicasts. So I've actually had to use IPFW on my server to limit my bandwidth going out of my box so that I don't, again, eat up my 1 gig uplink to my building. So we got one at the microphone.
We find starting to get some match with Fusion drives. We haven't necessarily tried this yet, but is there any tips or tricks that moving, especially you have an image from a machine that wasn't made with a Fusion drive and you want to put it into a machine that has Fusion? Are there any tips and tricks to know?
So I have a tip for that in the sense of make sure that you're using a Fusion workflow, which again, I don't have my actual production ones here right now, but the tip is to make sure you're using a workflow. And the one thing I'm not actually doing in production right now that I would recommend to someone else to do is use your nested workflows. So use a script that detects if it's a Fusion drive. And tip here is I believe in 10.10 you can now actually do that much easier with the distoutil command. Distoutil, yeah, I think it's distoutil. Yeah. So you can it'll actually tell you now that it's actually a Fusion drive. So my recommendation is build a script, detect it's a Fusion drive, and then use that script to dynamically select a workflow that has the Fusion task in it.
In my experience is images are images and they restore to whatever volume you set up. It doesn't matter what the underlying disks are.
When we first deployed our Fusion machines, I had some problems where if you deployed to a Fusion equipped machine, after the image was finished laying down and it rebooted, you get the prohibited symbol or something. And that was most likely to happen if the netboot set that actually restored the image is a different version of the operating system than what you're laying down. There's a little checkbox in DeployStudio this for preventative volume repair. That solves a lot of that stuff. And the other way to solve it is if you're deploying Yosemite, make sure the netboot image is also Yosemite.
Yeah, that reminds me of another thing. The builds. Make sure that the build is supported on the new hardware too. And the force trackpad ones you had issues with, yeah. And the 10.4 now it should be unified and so fix all that. But yeah.
It's kind of trivial, but sometimes I find that when it reboots into the DeployStudio, whatever it's called, and then starts running things, it just replays old log files.
Old ones?
Yeah, it just replays ones from like last year.
From the same machine?
Yeah, instead of telling me actually what's going on now.
Within the DeployStudio admin interface or during the behind the runtime window on the netboot?
No, after it reboots and starts doing the things on first.
Oh, on first boot.
Yeah.
How would it's displaying a local log at that point.
Yeah, it's got to be.
And are you imaging those machines?
No, generally not.
So, okay, so running a workflow where there was a workflow run before.
Yes.
That's interesting. I don't know. I haven't seen that.
I have it on a lot of my machines.
Yeah. I would almost take a wager that the ds_finalize log that it's generating, that's what that window in the background is displaying. The ds_finalize app is displaying is that log. So I'm wondering if you're not nuking that log file, then if it's probably just going back and maybe starting at the beginning of that log file as opposed to it being a fresh log file. Right, yeah. So it's probably just because you're not nuking that file. So my recommendation is if that's getting annoying, write a little script that deletes that file.
Yeah, I can't do that as part of the netboot because I think it...
No, at the netboot, while you're in the netboot, you can mount the actual OS that's already existing, and you can go in and get rid of it.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay.
It should actually be mounted already, so we should be able to just find it in volumes. I think it actually, if it's already Macintosh HD, volume/Macintosh HD is actually the existing drive that's already there, not your runtime.
I guess, okay.
I think.
The other issue I have now a lot is that it just reboots back to the OS instead of going and running the after first boot
ds_finalize.
Yeah.
That I've never
run it. I just run it in a terminal window, but I don't know if that's the greatest option.
Yeah. Yeah. No. It's ideal to have the finalization.
Is there something I need to be getting rid of, or?
I've never seen that happen either. Like typically, you
got to come visit.
Yeah, really. I do consulting.
No.
So yeah, I haven't seen that yet. So
Okay.
my recommendation, my final recommendation is I try to be active on the forums, and I know there's other people that are much more active on the forums than I am, as well as there's a DeployStudio Facebook group, and there's now a DeployStudio channel in Slack, which we don't have that up anymore. But for those of you that are already in Slack or want to be in Slack, we have a channel in the Slack MacAdmins organization. So I'm in there anytime. Give me a mention, and it'll pop up on my phone. The Facebook group is just DeployStudio, I believe. I don't have Facebook. I think it's a closed group, actually. Okay. So we've got to fix that.
Yeah, you have to join.
So the last thing I want to mention with 13 seconds remaining is we have probably about 85 DeployStudio stickers. They're little 2-inch by 2-inch stickers that are the same size as your Apple logo that you usually get. So there's only 85, and it's looking like there's more than 85 people in here. So please don't stampede, but and also please only take one, because I want everyone to get one that can. So show your DeployStudio product.